According to WebMD, there are currently over 105,000 people waiting for an organ transplant in the United States. That number increases by more than 4,000 people each day. The topic of being an organ donor hits close to home for me. My family has been able to benefit from the generous act of a donor. I have an uncle who was very sick for a long time and was on a waiting list for a heart transplant. Even though he was on the list for a heart for a while, he eventually got the call that a match was found for him and he was going to be getting a heart transplant coming up in the future. It's a difficult process for all of those involved, I'm sure, but I will be forever grateful to the person who donated their organs and extended my uncle's lifespan tremendously. The process to become an organ donor is so simple that it's a shame we don't have more donors available for those that need them. I will discuss the pros and cons of becoming an organ donor and why it is so beneficial for others that may need an organ transplant. I will also discuss the process it takes to become listed as an organ donor. First, I will discuss the myths that people often hear that deter them from becoming a donor. There are many myths that often deter people from becoming an organ donor. One myth that actually kept me from becoming an organ donor for many years was that doctors wouldn't work as hard to save my life if they knew that I was going to be an organ donor after I passed away. This is simply not true. Doctors do not work harder to save someone else's life than they would to save your own. When you go to a hospital, a doctor that specializes in the help that you need is going to be assigned to help you. According to the Mayo Clinic staff, doctors will not let your life slip away simply to save the life of someone else. Another myth that never actually deterred me from becoming an organ donor, but has deterred others, is that you may not really be dead before they begin removing your organs. As you can see, I have a list of a few of these myths over here next to me. Again, according to the Mayo staff, organ donors are given additional tests in order to ensure that the patient has actually passed away. These tests are actually not conducted on patients that pass away that are not organ donors, and the expense of these tests are not passed along to the family after the patient has passed away. People are often afraid that they will not be able to have an open casket funeral if they donate their organs. Again, this is also not true. The Mayo Clinic staff has shot down this myth. Because people are clothed when they are buried, you cannot see the incisions that are done on patients that come from donating organs and tissues. Bone and skin transplants are also able to be masked by the clothing and by rods where the bones would go. By taking a small piece of skin from the back of the patient, they are able to mask a skin transplant that may have taken place. Families are not charged for the expenses for donating organs. The Mayo Clinic staff states the costs from exhausting any and all efforts to keep the family member alive are often misinterpreted as costs from the donation. The recipient of the organ is actually the person responsible for the costs incurred from having an organ transplant. Being an organ donor doesn't mean you have to be deceased. More than 105,000 people in the United States are on the waiting list for some type of transplant. You don't have to be deceased in order to donate an organ. If you are a good match for someone, you may donate an organ to help save their life. Oftentimes, family members will be a good match for others within their family and will donate organs in order to help out that family member. Not all organs can be donated while the donor is living, but those that can be would include kidneys, partial liver transplants, as well as partial pancreas and intestines, and also a lobe of a lung if it is needed. Living donors typically go on to live normal, happy lives. Some organs will regenerate to make up for the lost organ, while others will simply be fine taking on the additional work without regenerating. According to Donate Life, recovery time for donors is typically 2 to 6 weeks, and after that you can go back to living your normal everyday life. As with most things, there are pros and cons to being an organ donor. The pros of being an organ donor far outweigh the cons. Health research funding has a list of pros and cons that may help people consider when making difficult decisions to become an organ donor. Pros to being an organ donor include saving lives, saving medical expenses that people may be incurring on a daily basis or weekly, and extending the lifespan of others. Organ transplants may save medical costs by eliminating routine medical procedures that the recipient was doing before the transplant took place. For example, A person that needs a kidney transplant would eliminate kidney dialysis treatments if they were to receive that transplant. Along with the pros of a major decision come the cons. One con from organ donation is the emotional distress that families often feel for their loved one during this emotional process. Another con is that religious families may struggle with the thought of whom the organ may be going to. Many people prefer that an organ may go to another person with the same religious backgrounds and beliefs as them. Becoming an organ donor is a very simple process. There are a few different ways to become an organ donor. 2 ways to sign up would include going to the organ donor website and also indicating this on your driver's license when you go to renew or just have one printed. In addition to registering to become an organ donor, you should let your friends, family, and your doctors know that you have made this decision. Also, you should note it in your will and your living will. The number of recipients needing organs is far greater than donors. The process to becoming an organ donor is very simple and can be done easily in little to no time at all. The number of people needing organs and or tissue is much greater than the number of people that are willing and able to donate. One person can save up to 8 lives after they are deceased if they are registered as a donor. Being an organ donor is very important to me. I have seen firsthand the benefits that come from the family of a recipient of an organ. While I have not seen how this decision may affect the family of the donor, I can't help but ask the question, if you knew you had the opportunity to save someone's life, would you?